Hello and welcome. My name is Kara and I blog about knitting at thenitmckinley.com. I also sell knitting patterns as well as project bags on Ravelry and on Etsy. In the description box below, you'll find links to all of the places to find me around the internet as well as to the blog post that goes along with this specific yarn review. I started this YouTube channel specifically to do yarn reviews because I really enjoy yarn and talking about yarn, and I thought video would be a really great format to expand the yarn reviews that I'd started to do on my blog. I think that pictures are great, but a video is, even more descriptive than a picture because I can do things like this and show you the yarn is squishy. So today I'm excited to talk about two things. First of all, Peerie yarn, which is the yarn that I will be reviewing today. And then I am also going to talk just a little bit about the hat that I knit with this yarn because it is a new pattern. And this is the Prudence Island hat pattern, which you can get on Etsy or Ravelry. So let's talk about the yarn first. So this is a Brooklyn Tweed yarn called Peerie. It is a fingering weight wool. It comes in 50 gram skeins and that works out to being 210 yards. The yarn is 100% wool. And one of the things that Brooklyn Tweed is known for is that they procure or source as well as spin, dye, whatever manufacturing processes are involved, all of their yarns within the United States. So on the ball band, you do get a little bit of information about where the yarn has come from. This yarn was sourced in Utah, Nevada, spun in Springvale, Maine, and dyed in Saco, Maine, or Saco. And I apologize to the good people of Maine for mispronouncing that particular name. So one of the things I would note that I didn't like about buying this yarn at the retailer was that it didn't have the weight on it. I mean, I could tell because it was, in the 200 yarn range and not the 400 yard range that this was probably a 50 gram skein, but the ball band actually does not tell you what the weight of the yarn is. Now, I would give the manufacturer many good points, for giving us a little bit more information on the inside of the ball band about the yarn. And they have similar information expanded a little bit on their website, which I do think is great. So on the right here, it says Meet Peerie, and it has a little bit of a description of the yarn. It's a 4-ply worsted spun yarn, and that it's light and bouncy, good for your textured knits. In the middle, they do have a call to action, including sharing your work and their Instagram and Facebook information. And then lastly, and this does get them huge points. So even though I would, deduct on my invisible point scale for not telling me that it's a 50 gram ball on the actual ball band, I would note that this is really great care instructions. And oftentimes, especially with small batch and small dye houses, you don't get a lot of care instructions for the yarn, either on their website or on the ball band itself. And I appreciate that Brooklyn Tweed both took the time to write out in a bulleted format on their website how to care for their yarn, and they gave you an abbreviated version of that literally on the ball band itself for when you leave the store. So I do think that that is great. The last piece of information to share on specs for this yarn is the gauge, and unfortunately the sticker holding the ball band itself closed was over where this is, so I'm just going to hold this up. That's okay if you can't read it, I think. So the gauge range is 6 1/4 to 8 stitches per inch, and that's on a US 2 to 4 or 2 3/4 to 3.5 millimeter needle. I ended up using a US 3, which is a 3 1/4 millimeter needle, and I'm really happy with how the yarn knit up for me. So let's talk about the yarn and the fiber itself. So interestingly enough, this is a 100% American wool yarn. It also isn't a superwash yarn. And it's not just that, I deducted that from the care instructions. I did check online. One of the reasons I thought that this might be at first was, because often sock yarns are superwash and this is fingering weight. But it also has this tight twist, and I'm hoping maybe if I turn it a little bit, you can really sort of get a good visual of that. And it reminds me almost of a fingering weight version of Cascade's superwash wool, just in the way that it feels, the spin of the yarn itself, the texture of it. It feels almost more like a superwash processed yarn than it does a sort of more rustic, locally sourced yarn, like what I would associate with that kind of a yarn, what I would expect from that kind of a yarn. So I picked this out at my local yarn store in part because I had an idea in my head for doing a hat with twisted stitches. And so I wanted a yarn that was going to give me really good stitch definition. And one of the things the manufacturer says on the ball band is that it is strong and bouncy and that Peerie truly sings in cabled or textured fabrics. And I think that that's right. This does also come in a lot of colors. Unfortunately, this color, which is arabesque, has now been retired. Huge props to their customer service because I emailed them to ask if it was still available because I didn't see it on their website, and they got back to me in less than a day, which is fabulous. But it comes in a lot of colors, and I think that there are yarns where the yarn does something. It's self-striping or it's highly variegated, and the yarn itself is kind of almost the star of the show, and so it looks great in stockinette stitch, but you lose color or pattern when you start adding in like lace or texture or trying to do color work with it. And this is a yarn that is going to make your project look good instead of you picking a project to make your yarn look good. So this is the Prudence hat, and you can see the stitch definition on this is really quite fantastic, and that is a function of the yarn. I think that this would be great for any of your cabled projects, lace work, textured stitches of any kind. I do think color work as well. I just do less color work, so I can't speak with as much authority to color work. But for textured stitches and for cable lovers like me, this is a really great yarn to pick and use. I do think that downside is if you are looking for a rustic yarn and you pick this because of the pieces on the website that talk about being like sourced in America and they really give you a lot of insights into the process. Interestingly enough, this is not quite the yarn that I would associate with the way it is described because it does feel a little bit more manufactured. Now, I would not recommend this for your socks unless you are a much gentler sock wearer than I am. I feel like this yarn might be prone to pilling on your feet. And because it is a hand wash, lay flat to dry yarn, if you're somebody like me who loves taking advantage of the gentle cycle on the washer and dryer and just washing all your socks, and then some of them do go in the dryer, some of them I do hang up to dry. This isn't the yarn for that level of easy care. Now, if you're a better yarn carer than I am, by all means, I think this would be beautiful in a pair of socks. What I do think this yarn would be great for is accessories like hats, shawls, scarves, all of that. I also think that this would be absolutely gorgeous in a sweater. And because it does feel more like a superwash and it has a really smooth texture, I would actually also say that this is great for on your skin contact. I knit a hat with this yarn. So let's talk about both the knitting experience and my new hat here. This is the Prudence Island hat. It is available for small and large adults, meaning it has the two sizes available in the pattern. And it is an all over twisted stitch pattern, separated with little single seed stitch columns. All in all, this is not a complicated hat pattern. So if you're somebody who is able to do things like knitting around and you have a little bit of experience with like twisting stitches or doing a little bit of texture, I actually think that this is a really accessible pattern and a really good option. So knitting this with the Peerie yarn was a really great experience. I really enjoyed how easy this yarn was to knit with. It was smooth, it really glided over the needles nicely, and again, it gave me really good stitch definition. Even before I washed and blocked this hat, it looked good right off the needles, which is amazing because especially with fingering weight yarns, when you're doing things like the brim, your ribs here, when you're looking at your twisted stitches, if it's not cables, I always find this more with twisted stitches, your yarn can really benefit from a good washing and blocking. And this particular yarn actually looked great coming off the needles, which I was pretty thrilled with. So I will include links to where you can buy this hat pattern below. If you are interested in that, it is discounted through Wednesday, September 22nd on both Ravelry and Etsy. So I would go ahead and grab it with that discount because the next time I have a sale won't be until I think Black Friday. And I think all in all that I would recommend trying out the Peerie yarn, which is fingering weight again. If you are looking for yarn that would be great with twisted stitches, cabling, and yes, if you are into color work, I think that this would look great with color work as well. All in all, I think the only cons I would recommend watching out for is that it doesn't feel like a rusted sort of natural wool yarn. It does feel like a yarn that was processed a little bit more, which if that's not something that you like, then this may not be the yarn for you. But if you're somebody who is completely okay with that knitting experience, I would go ahead and give this one a try. Again, my name is Kara and I blog about knitting at thenitmckinley.com. If you found this video at all useful, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more yarn reviews, please go ahead and subscribe and hit that little notification bell. And if you have suggestions for future videos or questions or comments about this one, please go ahead and leave a comment below. Until then, I'll see you next week. Bye.